Hi everyone, in today's video I am going to show you how I make baguettes at home. I'll show you three methods. One using a Challenger bread pan, one using a baking steel or baking stone with a turned over disposable aluminum pan weighed down over the top, and one using a lidded Emile Henry baguette baker. For the crispness of the crust and the light and airiness of the crumb, the first two methods are my favorite. But I'll go through all three methods, starting from the beginning with mixing the dough. To make the dough, whisk together 550 grams of bread or all-purpose flour, 15 grams of salt, and 2 grams of instant yeast. You can find the volume measurements in the linked recipe below. Add 385 grams of room temperature or cold water and mix until you have a shaggy dough ball. This is a 70% hydration dough, meaning it's not super high hydration, so you may need to get in there with your hand to help the dough come together. Cover the dough and let it rest for 30 minutes. After the rest, using a lightly wet hand, perform a set of stretches and folds. As you stretch and fold, you will feel the dough becoming stronger and more elastic. You will also feel the dry patches of dough becoming more hydrated, absorbing into the dough, and the dough ball overall becoming a more cohesive mass. Drizzle the dough with a small amount of olive oil, then cover the bowl and let it rise for 6 to 10 hours or until the dough has doubled in volume and is very bubbly. Using a flexible dough scraper, deflate the dough and turn it out onto a lightly floured work surface. Divide the dough into 4 equal portions. I like to use my scale to ensure that each portion weighs the exact same amount. These portions should weigh roughly 237 grams. Ball up each portion of dough. Lightly flour the dough balls, then transfer to individual storage containers. These are my favorite, and I'll link to them in the notes below. Transfer the dough balls to the fridge, ideally for at least a day or for as long as a week. On baking day, remove your dough ball from the fridge at least 3 hours before you plan on baking. Flatten it gently, then shape it into a log. Transfer the log to a lidded, lightly floured vessel, such as a dough mate. Cover the vessel and let rest at room temperature for roughly 2.5 to 3 hours. When the baguettes are ready for baking, the dough will feel very light to the touch and you will want to handle it delicately. To release the dough from the bottom of the vessel, gently push it back and forth, then brush off the excess flour. Transfer the dough to a sheet of parchment paper. Then using a sharp blade, make 3 vertical slits. For this first method, I'm using my Challenger bread pan. It has been preheating in the oven for roughly 30 minutes as the oven has made its way up to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Place the dough in the pan, cover the pan, and transfer to the oven for 10 minutes. Remove the pan from the oven, uncover it, then return the pan to the oven for another 10 minutes. Remove the pan from the oven and transfer the baguette to a cooling rack and let cool for at least 20 minutes before slicing. This baguette has a beautiful crust and crumb thanks to the steamy environment created by the Challenger bread pan. You can read more about the importance of steam for baking baguettes and other breads in the linked post below. Here are a few more baguettes baked with the same method. With this one, I used an Italian flour, Petra 0102. I've been loving this flour for my pizza, and I love it for my baguettes as well for both the texture and flavor it lends. One more with bread flour, and one more with the Petra. In this next method, I'm going to use my baking steel with the turned over disposable aluminum pan weighed down over the top. The method is the same. Allow the shaped baguette to rest at room temperature for roughly 2.5 to 3 hours before scoring and baking. The oven is at 450 degrees and it's been preheating for roughly 30 minutes. Shimmy the baguette onto the steel, cover with the disposable aluminum pan, and weigh it down with something heavy enough to keep it weighed down, but not so heavy that it will collapse the pan. Bake for 10 minutes, then remove the weight and remove the pan, and continue baking for 10 to 12 minutes more, or until the baguette is browned to your liking. Transfer to a cooling rack and allow to cool again for roughly 20 minutes before slicing. As noted previously, the color of this crust as well as its crisp texture can be attributed to baking with steam. The long slow rise also attributes to both the color of the crust and the texture of the crumb. This baguette was baked with the same method, on the baking steel with a turned over aluminum pan, but this dough saw no refrigeration. In the recipe linked below, you will find example timelines to help you plan your bake. To compare the crust of a baguette baked with steam and one without, I baked this one uncovered on my baking steel. And while the crumb is beautiful, the crust is dry and hard and dull. In this last method, I'm using an Emile Henry bread baker. To use it, butter as many wells as you'll be using. Then place your proofed baguette dough into the well and make 3 vertical slits. Cover the vessel, note this is not a preheated vessel, and place in a 450-degree oven for 10 minutes. Uncover the vessel and return it to the oven for another 10 to 12 minutes or until the baguette is browned to your liking. For the ease of this method, the results are pretty impressive. The crust is perhaps not as crunchy as the other 2 methods, and the crumb as well is not as light and airy, but it still tastes great. As always, let me know if you have any questions. Bye.